It is do or die time for Cartoon Network. In the months to come, they'll either do what they need to in order to turn themselves around, or die under the weight of unpopular, uninspired series and rapidly sinking ratings. It's been hard to gauge the channel lately, but we do have enough of Cartoon Network's strategy to piece together plenty of insight, and their coming plans might just make cause for concern. In the span of a decade, Cartoon Network has seemed to go from cultural juggernaut to borderline afterthought. While the age of Adventure Time ruling the roost is over, as much as WarnerMedia's own executives try to convince us it's not, it seems like they've been stuck in largely the same rut for the past several years. While the channel's newer miniseries like Infinity Train and Elliot from Earth deserve all the praise they get, for whatever reason, that quality doesn't seem to translate all that well into their full-length fare. Aside from a few standouts and eventual cartoon community darlings, two fairly divisive series, one consistently so, one only gaining its notoriety in death, have lorded over a procession of series from the underwhelming to the downright appalling, including one with the unenviable distinction of setting the bar for the worst show of the decade so far, in a way that would likely make even Fanboy and Chum Chum stay a good 10 feet away. I've talked at length about the many issues that riddle modern Cartoon Network already in prior videos, and while their kids' TV rivals at Nick and Disney have evolved considerably over the intervening years, it feels like little has truly changed at CN. Even fans of the channel have appeared to struggle to speak about it positively as of late. As new competition has entered the fray, Cartoon Network has struggled to stay interesting, and thus has taken some of the most precipitous ratings declines in the space, even as kids' TV has fragmented in general. Over the past year or so, however, Cartoon Network has been in a bit of a transitional period, laying the groundwork for a massive pivot for the channel. It all stems from last year's rejig of WarnerMedia in the wake of the launch of HBO Max. Tom Ascheim, new head of the division that oversees Cartoon Network, among other things, was given control over all of WarnerMedia's efforts at kids and family TV in late October 2020, as initially reported by Variety. As I discussed last fall, Ascheim's first order of business was to throw CN headlong into development of preschool fare, Cartoonito as we now know it, aping his gig 20 years ago as the architect behind the pivot of Nickelodeon's offshoot Noggin to that demographic. Ascheim's ideas for CN are pretty evident in this quote he gave for the article. "We want to expand the definition of kids and family offerings under the Cartoon Network pedigree. We are going to be an animated enterprise, but we will not always be cartoons. We're trying to serve the kids and family audience as widely as possible so we can be a better provider to HBO Max." Parsing that quote reveals several major shifts right off the bat. First off, that the network's looking to broaden itself, which sounds like a good move. They at least need new audiences to give the channel a try if they want any shot at improving their position in the space. Notably, however, the emphasis is on kids and family offerings, suggesting an intention to dive into the elusive quest for family or co-viewing fare that many a network has tried and failed to tap into. Look where The Hub and its successor Discovery Family ended up, for instance. What seems to be misunderstood is that this isn't a bygone era where broad appeal viewing like that was both plausible and attractive. The media landscape is fragmenting more and more seemingly every day, and diverse demographics are being catered to by an even more diverse selection of content and services, most recently fueled by WarnerMedia itself and its fellow conglomerates. Trying to cobble those disparate demographic directions into cohesive programming choices would be challenging, to put it in the most delusionally positive way. That's especially true for a channel with such a particularly defined remit like Cartoon Network, which has already had its channel space split in half for 2 decades with Adult Swim. With Cartoonito now slicing a third angle through CN, how long is it before the channel is pulled in so many directions that it's muddily unrecognizable? Ascheim's admission that Cartoon Network, at least as a brand, will not always be cartoons is also surprising. This broadly opens the door for CN's name to be tied to live action fare, something that hasn't happened in 7 or 8 years in isolated instances, and additionally apparently becoming the first concerted effort to push into live action programming since CN Reel from 2009 to 2010, widely seen as one of the lowest points in Cartoon Network's history. Certainly, accusations of such a return to that sort of an era will wildly fly, and any live-action product from CN, or branded as from them, will likely be an immediate object of scorn and derision before the show in question would have any chance to prove its case. Personally, I'm not opposed to the idea. If they can make live-action things well, then I welcome the variety. The live-action space has historically been a two-player game between Nick and Disney, so a fresh perspective by way of a new, serious attempt from CN would be much appreciated. They've certainly done it before with the short but relatively sweet Incredible Crew, but the Cartoon Network of 2013 that aired that was a far more interesting and upstanding place than the degenerative, desperate channel that exists by that name in 2021. A network already marred by content controversy in recent years, making an even more controversial content decision will certainly not bode well, at least at first. Probably the most immediately concerning part of the quote, however, is Ascheim seeing Cartoon Network not as a channel in itself, but rather as a provider to HBO Max. This makes one unbelievably important thing clear. Cartoon Network is going to feed their conglomerate's uncaring, bottomless pit. Their own future as a channel be damned. WarnerMedia may be looking to use HBO Max as their backup plan, in a sense, in case Cartoon Network as a channel goes under, ratings-wise. Something they're already dangerously close to, given they came out of 2020 with a ratings average of only 274,000 viewers. But every show CN feeds into HBO Max's forgettable depths is a show CN can't necessarily use to help itself, thus serving as a further detriment to Cartoon Network and accelerating its deterioration into somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. This may be tough news to break, but just from this quote alone, it sounds like Cartoon Network is being set up for failure. This will likely be especially true if the channel's lofty ambitions to establish itself in the preschool space don't pan out. From the looks of it right now, it seems like several HBO Max series are getting second window runs on Cartoon Network, which may mitigate the damage of keeping such a devotion to streaming, but it still doesn't resolve the issue of audience cannibalization that focusing on HBO Max instead of CN creates in the first place. If you've already seen it on streaming, what suggests one would want to follow reruns on CN? The show has to be pretty compelling to justify that, and we haven't seen that from them with any real consistency just yet. On February 5th, 2021, Kidscreen published an interview with Tom Ascheim, headlined WarnerMedia's Roadmap for World Domination. Don't get ahead of yourself, Tom, and revealed other details about his vision for CN. A focus for Ascheim is to pull the network away from the 6 to 11 male skew the channel's had for over a decade now, and pivot not only to add preschool content, but to be more girl-inclusive. The preschool foray is a simple explanation for Ascheim, arguing it's, quote, silly CN isn't in preschool, given that, according to him, that counts for a third of the kids' TV audience. Given how sturdily both Nick Jr. and Disney Jr. have rated his channels, I have reason to take his word on that. The bigger challenge will come with making Cartoon Network more girl-inclusive. Generally, kids' TV shows that predominantly appeal to girls have not rated very well in this country, and they've had a tendency to disinterest or outright repel boy viewers, even when they're not trying to. Nickelodeon's recent attempts at directly courting girls, such as Mysticons, The Other Kingdom, their turn at Hot Potato Miraculous Ladybug, and much of their telenovela cycle, were all relatively short-lived affairs compared to their more outwardly gender-neutral or boy-skewing products. The only reason Disney Channel seemed to make it work for the better part of the 2010s was because they went all in, selling out to predominantly girl-skewing fare almost completely, and building up Disney XD as a fallout shelter for the audiences they were so forcibly rejecting. Now that Disney XD has collapsed through sabotage, Disney Channel has now had to try to learn how to shake off those notions and welcome broader audiences again, something their animated team have seemed to do quicker than their live-action department. It doesn't sound like CN is willing to make that kind of a wholehearted investment, nor do they have the space or the time to, so there's a solid chance their attempts at making girl-skewing fare viable will end up just as uselessly unproductive as everyone else's shots at. Speaking to the channel's intentions to add family content, Ascheim argues that during the pandemic there's, quote, a real opportunity to make content that is genuinely appealing to kids and parents. This may have been true during quarantine, but as vaccination becomes more available and the most damaging effects of the pandemic ideally, head behind us, family viewing will likely become elusive to non-existent again. Thinking to Nick's recent attempts at, very few of the shows that were arguably aimed at family audiences were renewed for second seasons, and those that were didn't make it further. What suggests Cartoon Network will have a more fruitful time trying to crack that nut? Short-term content fixes are not what CN needs right now. They need major, positive shifts that will create long-term impact. What that will look like on screen is impossible to accurately guess, however, and their 2021 programming slate, both what we've seen already this year and what is still to come, is rife with short-term placation as a diversion from lack of long-term content development. The last thing this already ailing channel needs right now. Also notable from last year is Ascheim hiring Amy Friedman, who formerly worked with him at Nick, to head Cartoon Network The Channel. This typically relevant later, so keep it in mind. But Ascheim suggested that her hiring would be helpful for CN from a creative standpoint. Quote, "She's really smart and she's been in this business a long time, so she has incredible relationships in the creative community. They're already bringing us so many projects because they like working with her. Creatives have many places to bring their work, and part of our mission is to make them feel like they're going to have a chance to do their best. Amy will ensure that's true." I don't have any doubts in the creatives doing their best, or at least not intentionally trying to make a bad show. The bigger and more important question is, will Cartoon Network help these creatives do their best? Will they greenlight concepts that are actually appealing? Will they promote them and schedule them well enough so that not only can audiences be interested in these shows, but they can easily keep track of and get invested in them? And will they let up on excessive repeats of currently overplayed shows so that some of these other series have a chance to gain even more of an audience through highly visible and accessible reruns? The answers to all of these questions are solely within CN's control, but given what they've greenlit and how they've treated those shows, both in 2020 and more generally in recent years, I don't have any reason to feel confident that CN will develop appealing programming or support these shows adequately. It would be one thing if they were a creative underdog, but they've spent the past number of years actively being bad, testing the limits of both what audiences will sit through and how severely creative concepts can be butchered and broken down before they're incomprehensible. From a content standpoint, 2020 was the culmination of that work so far, not the repudiation of it. Modern Cartoon Network has tended to an image in the 2010s of being a haven for particularly creator-driven fare, but their performance as of late suggests something is wrong with how the ideas and the wills of these creatives are being executed, likely somewhere on the corporate level. Chiefly, Ascheim promised a reimagining of the network, and when the channel presented its upfront on February 17, 2021, that certainly seems like what we got.
Let's all sing a song!
Showtime!
Redraw Your World, Cartoon Network's new brand tagline, serves as an invitation to empower kids to feel comfortable with who they are, embrace their uniqueness, and believe in their own ability to impact change. It's also probably the most clever slogan I've heard since learning of the rationale behind Dare to Defy on half-sibling to CW. There are little idiosyncrasies and ironies throughout the 2-minute teaser clip, and I find them almost begging for dissection, even though I'll refrain from an intricate breakdown. There is very little new from mainline CN to look at, with many of the program clips being of current or even concluded CN series, Cartoonito, or oddly the Harry Potter films, which HBO Max somehow carved out of vertically integrated Warner Brothers' $250 million deal with NBC Universal, which began in 2018. Always modern, CN says, before showing a clip of their upcoming 1980s set spin-off of their 2010 reboot of a 2000s cartoon. Always inclusive, illustrated by Craig of the Creek. Well, I'm not diving into that can of worms, but always is for the cartoon historians to decide. The core takeaway is their new main through line, as Ascheim previously touted. Not always cartoons, but always animated. The concept seems poorly illustrated throughout the rest of the video in my eyes, leaning on Warner Brothers' film library to try and make the point that CN can do live action too. They have a live action series in development, and I wish they brought that up instead to better make that case. It might not have gotten to production yet by then, admittedly, and it may not even be there now, but it certainly would have been worth more thought to me. The promise of Animated live-action productions could potentially offer CN an attractive point of difference to the long-entrenched aesthetics of Disney and Nick, though that's only if it's done well, and we won't be seeing whether that's the case until CN's first live-action series under this strategy premieres. Family Mashup, created by Michael Porres of late 2000s Disney Channel notability. Though the fact that CN is going all in on this one series is also telling of their early commitment. It's fine for them to only want to dip their toe in the water, given their recent inexperience, but that puts a lot of expectations onto this one show to perform well for them. And if it doesn't, then it runs the risk of derailing the entirety of their efforts in the medium. It would be a shame, in my eyes, if a poor performance from Family Mashup, which isn't the greatest concept in the world as it is, as CN hops the a cappella train about 5 years too late, soured the entire kids' TV space's opinion of Cartoon Network making live-action series all over again. In a similar vein, Cartoon Network will be further expanding the content it looks to make with the recent announcement of Adult Swim's Jason DeMarco, figurehead of the block's Toonami anime strand, among other things, being elevated into a new position tasked with developing anime and action cartoon series for Warner Bros. Animation and Cartoon Network Studios, as reported in Deadline. Given both studios are the chief producers of the channel's original fare, this effectively signals Cartoon Network's upcoming entry into these genres and formats. The re-entry into action cartoons will be a welcome development for many after a period that has seen a dominating glut of comedic series, particularly on linear outlets, and chiefly driven by Cartoon Network themselves, including their antithetical attempts at so-called action comedies that, in practice, do little service to either genre. True action cartoons as of late have largely felt ghettoized to streaming services, whenever executives there are blindly throwing money at things just so happen to aim in that direction. However, CN will also be taking on anime, which is a much more trying proposition. Outside of Toonami and the occasional Toei import, anime exists in almost an entirely different ecosystem, and reconciling the two within the same space without alienating one or the other may prove a very slim needle to thread. Furthermore, a sizable number of Cartoon Network's recent series have been mired in controversy, from the overbearing divisiveness of Teen Titans Go to the transgressions, both real and contrived, that have marred Steven Universe, to the failure of poorly thought reboot after poorly thought reboot after poorly thought reboot, and so on. Anime and its community has developed into a space with unparalleled levels of toxicity amongst media, and it wouldn't be a good idea for Cartoon Network to attract the attention, and likely derision, of the anime space for inadvertent scandals through teething pains, given CN's already hobbled image in the kids' TV space. Any new anime project CN announces would likely immediately attract at least some level of controversy and biting scrutiny, deserved or not, and I can easily imagine the discourse crescendo quickly rising to the level that gradually came to impact CN's last major notable entry into the wider media zeitgeist, Steven Universe. Even at the announcement, the discourse has been brewing, and as much as there are some anime fans eager for a new entrant into the medium, there will be plenty more looking to instigate dispute that could hasten Cartoon Network's progressing decline. Action cartoon fans aren't happy about having anime tag along either, given their genre's already been burnt recently through streaming services making the abrasive association, which could prove further fuel to a nearly inevitable new fire, atop all the other ones CN needs to put out. Per an interview from Ascheim in August 2021, Cartoon Network's new focus from a thematic standpoint will center on individual expression, inclusion, and empowerment towards impactful change. A top-to-bottom approach to unify the entirety of WarnerMedia's Kids and Family offensive is underway to achieve these aims. Ideally, this mission statement will help CN retool its creative direction, which at times lately has felt blandly cookie-cutter, into something far more entertaining. I'm specifically not saying CN's creative aims haven't been cohesive per se, but recently it's been so to its detriment. Ideally, with Redraw Your World, that changes. Outwardly, from how Cartoon Network has been promoting and branding itself with this new retool, it looks somewhat like they're trying to position themselves in a similar way to Nickelodeon, longtime leader in the kids' TV space and CN's traditional rival on the cartoons front, at least historically. This makes sense, given how both Tom Ascheim himself and the new head of Cartoon Network, Amy Friedman, both hail from there, as well as in CN's new schedule, which splits the lineup between a preschool block, a mainstream kids TV block, and an adult/general audience-oriented block, mirroring pioneering moves made by Nick decades earlier. Dividing CN's airspace, and likely content budget, in two, or even three with the nascent ACME Night block, will likely prove a challenging move in itself, even with potential investment from HBO Max to help offset. It raises the question, with perhaps even more urgency now, as to whether Cartoon Network is spreading itself too thinly to be effective across all the audiences it wants to attract. ACME Night's limited length may help protect it somewhat from the effects of scant expenditure, but the issue will become quickly apparent on Cartoonito and the reduced Cartoon Network if it arises. The bigger problem impacting this sort of a pivot is that Cartoon Network already has an established image and established aesthetic. All of the main three networks do, and over the past few content cycles, it seems there's been little impetus to radically change them. Cartoon Network viewers don't tune into CN looking for Nick. And Nick viewers, or at least the ones most invested in their cartoons, aren't necessarily going to be interested in just anything CN brings out that may try to ape that mold, especially given Nick's own continuing main fills, and more importantly, Nick's own resurgent programming slate, which kicked off last year with the likes of It's Pony and the now defunct Ollie's Pack, and will likely continue well into next year at least. Imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, but flattery will get them nowhere. CN needs to stand on its own 2 feet if they want to stay relevant, and the way they do that is by making their own, uniquely compelling case with their content, their executive decisions, and their overall ethos, convincing viewers to tune in on their distinction, not the potential for familiarity. Rich words to say while we're deep in the worst of the age of reboots, yes, but it doesn't make them any less true. This moment in the history of Cartoon Network, and the crafting of its future, is deeply important, and needs to be deeply transformative in a way they've never been in a position to need before. In the face of their flagging relevancy as a channel, CN is still making a slew of mistakes that could very well doom them. Overextending their resources into preschool and family fare, their seemingly half-hearted push into live action, their even less ideal plans for anime. But if I can give them credit for anything, I'll give them credit for trying to do something. This kind of effort I haven't seen expended at CN for a while, and honestly, it probably should have been eased into years ago, before the situation got this bad, or to curb the mistakes that would create where the channel is now to begin with. In 2021 and beyond, it looks like Cartoon Network isn't willing to go down without a fight, and as they invite us to redraw our own world, maybe they can also succeed in reanimating theirs. But it's too early to tell how what's likely CN's last big roll of the dice will fare, with the effects only starting to make it on screen now. We still have to watch their story play out. My eyes will be following every single frame. For more discussions like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the latest from the world of television. And for the latest on how CN got to this point, watch my look at how they fared in 2020 up here or down the description. Thanks to my supporters for making this video possible. You can snag bonuses for just $3 a month at benzj.tk/join. I'm Benzie Johnson Jr., I'm enthusiastic about television, and I'll see you next time.